So ADL's Project NILE has developed the Learning Navigator. Think of it as a Google Maps for learning, and that federates all the interoperable services, all distributed services, by implementing the total learning architecture. So I'll kind of lean on your familiarity with Google Maps, because Google does not build the Starbucks or the gas stations or the roads or the highways, right? All it does is federates all of that stuff to provide you a pathway to your destination. And so what we have developed is the Google Maps for Learning, where we locate every learner's current knowledge, skills, and mindsets with high precision. And then using all the other distributed services that are interoperable with our system, we kind of provide a personalized and adaptive pathway. So the distributed systems themselves could be, it could be a virtual reality training, a surgical simulation, a synthetic training environment, videos and presentations, and all of those good stuff. And the way we are able to achieve that is in this project that we call as NILE, which is an acronym for Navigator for Integrated Learning Experience. We kind of implement all standards so that we are able to talk about the users, about competency frameworks, about learner identity, and so forth, using a variety of industry standards, and XAPI and LRS being two of the most important standards that we will address here. So this is the slide that sets the context. I'm going to jump in and talk about the learner experience, and I'll show that through a series of mobile mocks so that we don't have to actually study now, but we can understand the experience. Then my colleague Srini will talk about the mission control as to how the entire ecosystem or the stakeholders can manage the data and get real-time data. And then we will talk about the whole instructor experience. How does the instructor kind of monitor and personalize the interventions? And then we will touch upon the library experience with how do we create courses and so forth. So starting with the learner experience, the learner kind of starts their, in this case, Navigator application, and they select which of the journeys that they want to pursue. So I'm going to use a math example, but this works across soft skills and college readiness and a variety of other programs, which we'll talk about later. So the learner starts with the math navigation, confirms their grade, and takes a quick diagnostic and answers a few questions. And then what we compute is what we call as a skyline. So these are the different domains in math: counting and cardinality, operations in base 10, fractions, measurement and data, and so forth. These are the domains in math. Like Google Maps, we track 3 states. Either you have not started your journey, or you're in progress, which is in light blue, or you have mastered a competency in dark blue. So each of these squares are competencies, and the line that connects the highest competency the student has proficiency in is called the skyline, or we call it the skyline. So every learner has a skyline for every facet of learning. So that's how we locate the learner. The learner sets their destination, in this case, Math 8, and they say, I want to get to Math 8 level proficiency. So the gap between the skyline and this black line that we call as the high line, the gap between the skyline and the high line are the competencies that the learner needs to master. So we can kind of actually track how they're making progress, because we have discretized the whole thing using a competency framework. So the learner can say, ask for directions. So basically, there's a direction from their skyline to their destination or high line. So all of us can be in the same program and have the same high line, but because we all have different skylines, we end up getting different directions that's personalized to us. The learner looks at it and says, that sounds good, let's start navigation. Now the journey begins. So now the learner is trying to learn one competence at a time. They watch a video, they kind of do a project, which is an offline task, not a digital activity. Again, the video is from some other service, and they kind of, read a chapter or some other activity on some other distributed service. So for all the digital tasks that they did, the system sends the XAPI records of what the learner did. But for the physical tasks they did, like this project, the learner in this case scores themselves on a rubric and rates their experience. And now they take an assessment to see how well they did on this particular competency that they just learned. The learner gets 1 out of 3 wrong, doesn't do too well, and the system offers a reroute. It says, can you kind of study a little more? And then we will kind of, now it says, okay, show your mastery now that I studied a little more. And I take another assessment to kind of see how the learner did this time, and does very well. Congratulations. And the skyline for the learner bumps up, right? So this is how they gain one competency at a time. And at any time during the learning journey, they can click on the progress bar to see where they are in terms of performance, where they are in terms of the journey. The straight blue line was the original route, and the orange detours are the reroute suggestions made to the learner, or where they are in terms of proficiency. So they can inspect their proficiency and so forth, and we'll cover a lot of these things in other parts of the demo. But the key point here is, when I ran this large project on Google Maps, what I told the team was, it's not about driving directions, it's about eliminating the anxiety of travel. Since you can go to any city, any country, anywhere in the world, and you know that Google Maps can take you from airport to your hotel, hotel to your place of business, and so forth. So the way we achieve that is through 2 things: simplicity of use and assured success. And that's kind of the principle that we have brought in here as well, is how do we leverage the total learning architecture and all the distributed resources. But as far as the user is concerned, they just need to know, go straight for 1.2 miles and make a right turn. They just need to know what's their next learning activity. They don't need to understand all the other nuances that the system implements. So this is the student experience that we have. Every student kind of goes through different journeys and is achieving different levels of mastery in each of the different competencies that they encounter. So I'll just pause here and give the control to my colleague who will kind of go over the mission control. But while we are making the switch, if you have any questions, please, or comments, please share that with me.
I'd like to chime in here a little bit for folks who are less familiar with this. And I want to highlight that you're seeing math right now. This could be any topic. This could be infantry, this could be pilot skills, basic, physics. It could be anything. The thing that we really worked with Gooru on is the underlying architecture. So what Pram is showing you, the content here, is just content that they already happen to have, because they already do a lot of work with K-12, in fact, all over the world. And so our goal was not to invest in any content. And in fact, we haven't been working with them on content. We've been working with them on the algorithms and the architecture that's behind the scenes.
So and Pram, this is Reese. So does that mean that each and every learning event has to be mapped to fit into the skyline, so that as every event pops up, you have the established competency and proficiency that is available through that learning event that will then add, complement, or supplement the skyline?
Yeah, so we do that through machine classification. So yes, so we establish a competency framework, which we will also touch upon how we can auto-generate competency framework using a corpus of content in that discipline. And then we can take any pre-existing course and kind of align the course to competencies through machine classification, and then finally human editing on top of that. So, but you're right. So once every event or every learning activity is tagged to a competency, then when this learner engages with it, then it kind of logs data against it, and that is what is used continuously to kind of update our understanding of where the learner is and what other part of the journey they need to cover.
That
Perfect.
machine learning algorithm, which again is something that we actually currently have on our USA Learning instance, I think is a place that we may want to explore more, because that has a lot of value for the learning ecosystem of the future concept.
Well, also for simple things like the course catalog as well. I mean, that should help develop that in a more automated and standardized way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll kind of talk about the tools that we have developed in this project to support how pre-existing courses can be aligned to bring you the navigation experience with the assured learning outcomes for every learner, and the ability to track how the learners are progressing and scale success where we need to. Srini?
Yeah. So what we are looking at is the mission control, right? Like Pram showed, students learning on their own devices wherever they are. All of that data is aggregated, and the different stakeholders of the organization can then have access to real-time data through the mission control, right? So they can view KPIs and detailed reports about the learning of their cohorts. Mission control aggregates data not only from Navigator events, but also from distributed services, feeding XAPI data streams into our LRS, right? Navigator is also architected to evaluate data from distributed LRSs and then aggregate that data too. Now here, as a super user at Gooru, I have access to all of the learning that's happening on Gooru, on Open Gooru tenant. Now I can see that, data, how things are progressing in the US or India, or Brazil, or I can drill down into US and then look at, what's happening in each of the states in the US, right? The progress that has been made in February, for example, in terms of number of competencies gained in each of the states. I can drill down further and see the data for all the different school districts, or I can drill down further, go down to the individual school level, or down to the specific class, and then look at how the students are doing in that class, right? Now the access to these reports is based on the hierarchy set up for the tenant. In the US public schools, it's the district administrator, the school principal, curriculum coordinator, etc. So each of them, there's role-based access set up, which allows each of them to see data about their cohorts and not anything else, right? Similarly, we have KPIs, additional KPIs that we compute, like the number of new users who have joined this cohort, right? Or I can look at average session time spent, drill down and look at the further details of that, or performance and progress, and then drill down and see how things are going in each of those districts, right? So this is the the overview of what the different stakeholders can see. And down below, what we'll
I just interrupt here to make a point that so with the over 7 million users that we have, this spans education and skills. It's K-12. We do, for example, SAP, the software engineering, a software company with $30 billion in revenue. They train their engineers using this. And they have developed 10 courses, 11 courses that they use, like for machine learning, web development, cybersecurity, and so forth, and that they use to train their engineers. Now in Morocco, we have a World Bank funded project where they're training the automotive workers for skills training using the Navigator. In India, the primary school students are learning in local languages using the Navigator. So what Srini just showed you about the spread of how this is used is possible because all these different people have different systems and different content and different competency frameworks that they learn against. But the way that Google Maps works, analogous to that, which is whether you want to drive in California or take the train in Manhattan or walk in Mumbai, it's the same Google Maps. We just have to, get the local atlases aligned to the system. And that's what we have shown that is possible with the work that we have done with TLA. Yeah, Srini.
And down below here is we're looking at all the collaborators in the TLA ecosystem, right? So researchers and lab schools come together to innovate, with grants from funders. Out here, we are looking at different schools and implementers like SAP, Pram mentioned, implementing the navigator to validate their practices, content providers, to validate their efficacy of their content, or tech partners, right, to integrate the navigator using the open standards that we implement to become the next gen LMS, right? So we can drill down into each of these cards and look at all the different, in this case, for example, all the different universities and institutions that are participating in research and the kind of research that they are doing using the navigator.
Including ADL.
Including ADL, yes. Right. So this is the overall TLA, right, or the ecosystem in the TLA. Now I'm going to go in and talk a little bit about the competency, all the different competency frameworks that are possible. Like, for example, this is K-12, and we have different subjects in K-12 that we have competency models for defined. Similar to K-12, we can have competency models defined in professional learning or skills training, or LG actually stands for local governance, that we did in India, right? Now, to show you how the competency model looks, I'll show you the XAPI competency model framework that we have, that we defined for ADL, right? So this is the XAPI course. There are 13 domains covering 4 different levels, right, with about 56 competencies. You can drill down into each of the domains and look at what each of the competencies are. I'll switch into the math to show you how the navigator competency graph itself looks like, right? So this is the math competency model. I can look at the entire graph for a given competency, where I have linear progression or prerequisites that spans across multiple domains. I can inspect a competency and see all the learning map that is associated with it. This is where for every competency we have crawled and indexed content from OER content. For example, we have resources, 115 resources, 103 questions, different collections and assessments that people put together using this OER content for this specific competency. So what it means is anyone coming in and wanting to use the navigator have access to all of this content that is mapped to specific competencies.
So I'll just make a comment here. So like in Google Maps, when you say, show me all the coffee shops near me, right? It basically says it locates where you are on the latitude and longitude, and then says this, Starbucks is 0.1 mile away and it has a 4.8 star rating, and Speed's Coffee is 0.2 miles away and has a 4.9 star rating and stuff like that. So that's similarly how what we have developed is the ability to crawl and index all open resources, or we can bring in any other premium content people have and structure it so that for every competency we know how many assessments, what is being shown on the right side, how many assessments, how many collections, how many resources we have to cover all of those things.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate to the DoD folks who are seeing this for the first time, you're seeing the actual real live version of this system out there that the world is using and can use. But we also have a copy of all of this, not all the content, just the Google Maps, not the coffee shops that are there, on our USA Learning instance, available for our use without license issues.
All right. the same competency framework can be viewed as a tree, right? So like I'd shown you the XAPI competency framework. We can look at that.
Just do the math thing. I just texted you that. So let's say, just in the interest of time, let's stick to the math and then we'll generalize it subsequently.
Okay, all right. So yeah, so here we're looking at math, all the different levels. In the case of K-12, they're all grades. You can drill down on math, look at the different domains covered in that at that grade level, and drill down further and look at all the competencies. And for each of the competencies, there are micro competencies associated with it, right? So we have access to all of that info. We can look at the, again, all of the content associated with the competency, and then look at. You can actually preview the content, play it, and see what content is associated with it, right? So you have access to all of it. Switch to catalog and talk about the catalog here. As Pram mentioned, right, we are aggregating content that is out there on the web, all the OER content that is out there, right? Anyone who's integrating the navigator can bring in their premium content in, have it indexed and curated within the navigator, right? So here what we are showing you here is all of the different resources and questions that we have of all the different types. This is a distribution by subject, how many collections, assessments, resources, and questions that we have by subject. I can search for, let's say, a specific content, and then look at what are the collections that we have, what are the assessments that we have for that, or the resources. I can inspect specific resource, look at all the curation that we have done, right? All of the, basically we crawl, index the content, and then curate it and enrich it with all the metadata, right? So these are things that we can extract from the resource, but we also, tag it to specific competencies based on the content. We do content analysis and compute the transcript and summary, relevance, engagement, and efficacy. So all of these different metadata are computed as soon as it gets in. If you have your premium content, you bring it into the navigator, you can curate it and have all of these computations done and available. Okay. So now the advantage with this is you get access to, the basically content that is distributed, like Pram showed earlier on, right? It could be a simulation somewhere out there, right? Or it could be a virtual reality training. You can bring all of those and index it in the catalog and build your navigator course using that. Okay. I'll switch to showing what we have about the learner, right? Already have pulled it up here for a specific user. So here we are looking at what Pram showed you was students studying math and accruing, mastery in proficiency in math, right? Similarly, the student could be studying different facets. In this case, it's the K-12 subjects, not only the K-12 subjects, but soft skills for employability, social and emotional learning, etc. I can look at, how our skyline looks across all of these facets. So what we have here is the learner's, complete picture of the learner across all the different facets, across all disciplines. And we not only know that the learner in terms of their proficiency, but also in terms of the portfolio. We have info about the preferences of the learner. We also understand the learner in terms of their grit and perseverance and motivation, etc. And also about their community attributes like citizenship, authority, and reputation. And I can
just make one quick point. So in Google Maps, the most important thing is where is the blue arrow? There's no harm if you miss an exit or make a wrong turn. As long as the blue arrow also turns that way, then it's going to reroute you and put you back on the path to your destination. And that's kind of why it is so critical for us to be the blue arrow in Google Maps. Understand the learner completely, not just in terms of how they did on a particular quiz, but kind of build a complete understanding, including their knowledge across different subjects or facets, as well as their mindsets like grit, perseverance, their community activities, and all of that stuff. And that's what we have enabled by looking at how do we build this learner profile, and as well as provide a visualization of this that is intuitive and people can relate to. And this idea of a skyline for the learner that spans across the different facets that you can subsequently now drill down to see how the learner is doing in any particular facet.
Right. Yeah, so we can drill down not only at the facet, but down to the domain level, and then eventually down to the competency itself, and see how the user has done in each of these, right? So, so that is the mission control, and obviously have, depending on the role, different access, different users have different access. I'll move to the library. And,
yeah, but he's making that shift. I'll kind of reiterate that the underlying architecture allows us to, and so there are two things that you need to kind of partition this. One is the UI and the experience that the user is having. That is important because usability is critical to get engagement and outcomes. But the equally important or more important thing is what is the underlying technology that is making the whole thing happen? How are we able to kind of curate all the learning activities that are out there and catalog them? And how are we able to understand the learner so completely? All this happens because we are processing continuously all the data streams that are coming from all the interactions from between the learner and the learning activity, and using that to continuously build a model using AI techniques about our understanding of the learner and our understanding of the learning activity. And we combine these two to provide the pathways or personalize the pathways or adaptive pathways for every learner. So while we are showing you a lot of the UI and the application, I just want to kind of continuously reiterate that there is an underlying technology that is making all of this possible. And like Google Maps, it's there's humongous amounts of technology, but the application itself is so simple that it becomes ubiquitous now. Yeah, Srini.
Okay. So this is the library product where users have access to all of the curated content, the OER content that we have already curated. They can bring in their premium content and have it accessible here, and actually create your Navigator courses, right? Because you can also create not just a course, but collections, assessments, offline activities, resources, and questions, etc. Right? Now, what I'll do is in creating a Navigator course, I'll show it in terms of an existing, the structure of the Navigator course and how you go about building it in the context of an existing course. In this case, this is soft skills for employability. So all of our courses are basically structured as units and lessons. Typically, unit is for a specific domain. In this case, the domain is, as you can see, you have teamwork, leadership, communication, professionalism, etc. And in teamwork domain, what we have, so in that unit, we have lessons, and each lesson teaches a specific competency in that domain. So lesson, in this case, the lesson identifying team membership and role is actually teaching that competency. And the lesson contains a collection. Collection is nothing but a playlist of resources. The resources are actually not necessarily from within our thing. It can be from any of the distributed services that provide that a learning activity, or it can be an assessment, right? And plus an assessment that the student takes to validate that understanding of that concept, right? So inside you can go into a specific collection, look at all the different collections that are there, different resources that are there. Typically, like I said, we can have all the different kinds of resources be part of this collection. This, for example, is a simulation, and in this case, we are looking at a human body, human anatomy, or you can be a flight simulator or memory game or just a video. All of the different types of resources and content from varied sources can be part of your collection. Collection is tagged to a specific competency. And then, or you can add new collections and assessments, either create new collections or new assessments, or pull collections and assessments from your catalog that you already have. Right? So this is how we go about creating an activity or as a lesson. One of the things that we also
reiterate one point here, which is, all of the material, all of the content, all of the learning activities that you see here comes from different systems. There's no content within the system. All the navigator holds is a pointer to that, right? So when the student has to interact with the 3D simulation, or has to interact with the virtual reality, or has to interact with a video, or even a PDF document, all of those reside wherever they reside. And when the student kind of engages with it, the data from that interaction is logged, and that is what is being processed to continuously maintain our understanding of the learner, as well as the detailed understanding of the learning activity itself. And this kind of what Srini is right now showing, from the learner's perspective, it may appear that everything is right here and it just plays, but the way it is kind of the underlying architecture that implements this kind of leverages the complete distributedness of all the learning activities and experiences that are available.
Right, and I want to also show that not necessarily that everything is video or a web page or an interactive that is on the web, but it's also like in project that you are expected to do offline, right? As a team, you need to complete a certain project, right? There's a certain set of tasks defined for you to complete, and then you essentially what you do is once you complete those tasks, submit evidence for having completed it, and then you can evaluate that using the rubric, right? So different rubrics are available for you to pull up and associate with this offline task, right? So that's essentially how you put together a Navigator course. In terms of units, lessons, collections, and assessments, you create a unit for a domain, you create a lesson for every competency that you want to teach, and then the student is then navigated from one competency to another as they complete their learning.
And I'd like to talk a little bit too. We have about 15 minutes left, so maybe about 5 more minutes of demo, and then that'll leave us about 10 minutes to do kind of discussion at the end.
Sure. So,
okay.
Michelle, do you want to switch and show the instructor experience very quickly?
Sure. And while she's doing that, Pram, I know you and I had talked previously about over the last year and a half, as we've worked together, you've taken what existed previously in Gooru and really opened it up to be more of a service-oriented architecture with standardized APIs. And that's a lot of the work that we were exploring. And you were telling me that people all over the world have started using it, and because they've been able to interface with it in ways that you hadn't even anticipated?
Yeah, we have literally 29 countries, over 61 collaborators who have, just plugged in and started leveraging the Navigator. It's open and free, so people are able to access it without any friction whatsoever. And the fact that it has all standards, protocols, and interoperability established makes it simple for anybody to kind of plug in their system and begin to use their set of services in the disciplines that they are trying to teach. Like I mentioned, it ranges from SAP training their engineers in Silicon Valley to US K-12 schools to, automotive workers in Morocco or primary school students in India learning in Indian languages. So we have that full spectrum covered. And, and this literally we are looking at going from 7 million to about 40 million by the end of this calendar year, given what is in our pipeline and the number of conversations that we are having with other collaborators as well. Yeah, Michelle.
Sure. So I will quickly go through the instructor experience. You can see here the breadth of different courses that can go into a Navigator course. It could really be anything. I will go into the math experience quickly. Just to reiterate the point, each learner has their own skyline. The instructor can see this, and you can inspect the skyline for each learner. So a learner like Buzz Aldrin, we can see he's getting close to his high line. And then for every competency, although it is complex, the teacher sees the clear visualization, and then you can continually drill down and see more about this learner and what they've done. You can also push a suggestion from here for the learner. You can also look and see that Captain America, while studying the same course, is a little further behind and hasn't completed other components of the skyline. Again, you could click in further into domains and inspect here, like Srini showed on mission control. Going into the learning journey, you can see that from the instructor side, you can see the whole course, and you begin to get the all the data for your learners. You can see how many learners have studied. Everything is designed in a traffic light system. That green means everything is going pretty well. This is the average performance in here. And then red means stop. Let's see, we can help support the learner. You can see and also do a deeper dive. So if I click into here, I can begin to see what learners have done on this formative assessment, and click even further, sort by score, and start to see where the learners are, and even make suggestions from here. When I click suggestions, there are curated suggestions from the open catalog. I could also pull from my content or other tenant libraries or from the existing course map, and this is quickly pushed to the learner. So it's a combination of machine-generated curation with teacher input, who and what should get and what content they should get. Just to reiterate the point that each learner has an individualized journey, you can see here, Buzz only has math 7 and 8 to study, whereas Captain America had gaps in his skyline, and he has additional content. So if you drill down, you could see more. Specifically, like Srini had showed, each lesson, it corresponds to a competency, and you could see that there are collections as well as formative assessments. Captain America struggled here. He was offered a suggestion. He took that. So although he deviated from his path, he's still going back into his learning journey and restudying the concept in an additional way. So other features that could be used, I just want to talk about quickly. We have Go Live assessments, which is a place where an instructor can quickly get the pulse of the learners. If you click here, you can see that learners have started to study, and you could get a sense of where they are. You can also, and to me this is an incredible feature from a teacher, you can have offline projects. So there's a full spectrum of learning activities. And clicking in, since I have to grade this as an instructor, I can carousel through my student responses quickly and get a sense of how the students answered, and then I could grade directly in the system. Again, it's all color coded, and I could respond to the learner with additional feedback. So quickly, I'll wrap up. I'm going to go back to the student locator, and I just want to show there are multiple places where an instructor can get a sense of the class. So they can go back this week, beginning till now, and they can see time spent on assessments, on collections, as well as competencies gained, and where learners have decided to do a deeper dive and demonstrate a greater depth of knowledge. Every competency has assessments and tasks in the learning map that are mapped to depth of knowledge. And again, you could click in further here and specifically see which competencies there have been proficiency, inferred competency, and then what's in progress still. And then if we go to the overall student performance, this is sort of our air traffic control bird's eye view. You can see the performance and proficiency of each learner and how far they are to reach their destination. And finally, learning challenges and learning gaps that are demonstrated, and they're bucketed by learners, so you could quickly click in and offer a suggestion. And this is suggested content, and again, another spot where you can go into your own content. It could go into a suggestion to the learner or into that class activity page that I showed earlier. So I will stop here.
All right, that gives us about 10 minutes for discussion. I'm going to turn off the recording so we can have kind of an open discussion.